Hello and welcome to Let's Talk. Switzerland is often regarded as one of the leading blockchain countries in the world. But does the Alpine nation live up to its name? And what does the future hold for the crypto industry here? That's the focus of today's discussion, so let's talk.
What's the future of crypto nation Switzerland?
We are coming to you today from the studio of the Parliament building here in Bern. And joining us today, we have our wonderful guest, Alexander Brunner, author of Crypto Nation Switzerland, as well as Matthew Allen, business and fintech correspondent at swissinfo.ch. Alexander, why don't we start with you? How did Switzerland earn this nickname as a crypto nation in the very first place? Give us a run through.
I guess it's an interesting story. There's a lot of luck involved, but when the first people learned about crypto or Bitcoin back in the days, it attracted some developers that they came here and eventually a few companies set up, and then it all spiraled. And I guess someone invented the term crypto valley in Zug, and it grabbed global headline. And so one led to another with the government getting in more activities on the business side.
Now, Matt, you have actually been following this industry from the very beginning. What actually caught your attention in your early coverage of the industry? Was it also a bit of luck, as Alexander mentioned?
Yeah, I think so. I was always very interested, almost amused at this sort of rebellious upstarts, tech revolutions to choose a conservative Switzerland as a venue, as a place to host itself. But I think some of it was that, these companies were looking for a bit of stability. When I first encountered cryptocurrency as a journalist, as a reporter, I was at first attracted to these headlines of rebellion, these crazy characters behind it, and there were some crime stories as well, and I thought this would be kind of fun. So I around about 2014, when the first companies started setting up in Switzerland, I asked them about this, and I actually soon discovered that this technology is not just a sort of a website for drug dealers or something. There's a much more profound purpose and reason behind blockchain and cryptocurrencies, which could actually be a force for the good. So yeah, I started off. It started off as a sort of a crime story, if you like, and now it's turning into a tech story. And maybe in future it'll be a sort of a really good news for society. We'll see.
And in the space of a few years, we've seen so many developments happening in this area. The blockchain ecosystem continues to grow, continues to develop. And just for our audiences back at home, many are still drawn to the promises of this technology and having a decentralized database and not having intermediaries. So just think about a bank, a broker, a lawyer. Others, however, still remain skeptical. They think that it can be a tool for money laundering or fraud. But either way, the blockchain industry continues to grow, especially here in Switzerland. And we just want to bring you some figures up on the screen to show exactly where we stand at the current moment. Now, the number of companies in Crypto Valley in 2021 was 1,128. The crypto sector in Switzerland and Liechtenstein employs roughly 6,000 people. And in total, there are 14 unicorns. So these are companies with a valuation of more than $1 billion. For both of our guests, these numbers seem to paint quite a positive trajectory of the growth of Crypto Valley, of Crypto Nation Switzerland. What's actually behind these numbers? Alexander.
I think it's important to keep in mind it's quite a very young industry, and I think the development before 2017 was dramatically different than the last 3 years. What we've seen is a lot of large institutions adopting cryptocurrencies, blockchain technology, and also some coming to Switzerland because of that. But it's still a young industry. It's less than 10 years old, and the institutional base is maybe 3 years old. So we did a study, Swiss Digital Asset Market Report, and there's about 4,000 FTEs that is working in digital assets. If you compare that with the banking industry, has roughly 100,000 people employed, it's still small, but the trajectory is really growing. You see a lot of companies coming to Switzerland. You see companies in the US, in the UK, in Singapore growing at rapid clips. So I think the momentum has really picked up in the last 2 years.
Matt, do these numbers tell the whole story of what's actually going behind the scenes in Crypto Nation Switzerland?
Well, I think, as Alex said before, it was a bit of an experimental accident, really, that this industry took off. It was a small canton in the center of Switzerland called Zug, which really took a punt on a wandering blockchain company called Ethereum that was looking for a home, and they said, well, let's set up here. It's a tradition of Switzerland to encourage foreign firms to set up in Switzerland. And I don't think anyone could see then that it was going to create such waves and such headlines. And what we saw was in 2017 was a massive explosion. Led by a wild price hikes in Bitcoin, which encouraged startups to crowd fund or crowd raise money from the general public. And suddenly you had an awful lot of companies, startups, with millions and millions of dollars under their belt looking for a home and looking for somewhere to put that cash. And they came to Switzerland. Switzerland opened its arms to this kind of thing. Along the way, of course, there was quite a few companies that came and didn't have a good business model. They don't exist anymore. There were one or two scams as well. I mean, when you get this kind of public frenzy to get rich quick, these things can happen. Some of the companies disappeared. It was a Wild West phase. But now things are sort of quietened down a bit, and I think the regulators and the lawmakers have got this under control a bit.
Alexander, do you think we are past the hype, that we are past the frenzy? And how can Crypto Valley sustain the growth in the long term? Because you said the industry is still fairly small.
I would first really think about Crypto Valley as what is going on in Switzerland overall, not only in Zug. And the second thing, what you've been seeing is it's sort of, if you talk about crypto or blockchain, those are actually different things. And what you can see in Switzerland, like at the intersection of traditional finance and this new finance, digital assets, you see a lot of traditional players entering. You know, Julius Baer Bank is offering now services. BBVA, a Spanish bank, has their setup here. Hedge funds are coming to Switzerland. So this is the financial vertical that is really becoming a bit more quiet because it's more regulated. There's less, outrageous claims. Then you got a lot of things happening in the corporate world. There's pharma ledger activities with Roche and Novartis. That's again corporate, a more subdued, less marketing. And you got all those things that you could summarize under Web3, the NFTs, the collectibles, music. That's still a bit more bubbly. But I think if you look at those three different verticals, you see that there's an institutionalization drive going on. And that makes it a bit more quiet, but I think also more sustainable for the future.
And does that give it more legitimacy?
Very much so. I mean, a lot of companies, I just had dinner this week with like UK-based financial managers, as mentioned, they come to Switzerland because they're looking for sustainability. Because everyone learned you can't build a long-term business by circumventing the law, let's put it like that. So there is this drive to have a legitimate setup. And Switzerland offers, we have a law that can facilitate that. We have a regulator, we have the whole service industry. We have a lot of things that let you set up sustainable businesses.
So we've taken a look and assessed the situation at home locally in Switzerland. But on the global stage, what does Switzerland need to do to make sure that it keeps its name on the map, Matt?
Yeah, I think what Switzerland's done very well is to set up a framework under which these companies and this technology can set up, can thrive without getting into trouble. It contains it without necessarily taking away the innovative drive. But there's probably a couple of things that Switzerland needs to do, and I know it's addressing this. One is to build up a domestic workforce who are knowledgeable and highly qualified in blockchain. And I know there are various universities around Switzerland who are now offering graduate and postgraduate courses. what some of these companies, I speak to companies as well all the time that are coming in, and a lot of them say that they're hoping to inject some sort of Silicon Valley garage startup mentality. It's a thing that Switzerland sometimes struggles with. Make the mistakes, that's fine. You have to break a few eggs to create something useful. I think maybe this sort of attitude needs to come into the sector in Switzerland as well.
What other strategies do you see in place for Blockchain Nation Switzerland to get its name out there?
In May, we started an association, a public-private partnership called Home of Blockchain.swiss. That's endorsed by the Ministry of Finance, by Federal Counsel Uli Maurer. And we really want to bring this message to different jurisdictions. I give you a very simple example. There's a lot of interest at the moment from the UK in managers moving to Switzerland because of the current economic climate and the recession and various things. And actually, the UK government and the regulator hasn't been very friendly to those startups. So there's a few of our partners who literally come here because they feel that's a much more welcoming ecosystem here. And the second thing that's a really big drive, and we're going to have a big conference in November, is that traditionally where Switzerland is a hub for Europe, Singapore has been a hub for Asia, and Singapore is really thriving. A lot of companies who set up shop here actually also have presence in Singapore. And so this axis between Singapore and Switzerland is really beneficial for both sides. So it gives companies a regulated setup in both regions. And I think Switzerland has been very good, also with the help of Federal Counsel Uli Maurer, who's endorsing that.
We're actually going to take a look abroad at jurisdictions like Singapore, Switzerland, Dubai in just a moment. But first, we went on the ground to find out exactly why some entrepreneurs and blockchain companies had decided to set up in Switzerland and why they still find it so attractive here. Take a listen.
So, Switzerland is really has a high reputation in the space, just because a lot of companies have set up here already in this space. A lot of foundations, associations, a more up-to-date form or a different legal form for blockchains and protocols to set themselves up in Switzerland. You have a network of service providers, and of course also authorities like tax authorities, accountants that understand the nature of the crypto business. So what we see in general is that offshore jurisdictions lose a lot of attractiveness these days. So a lot of institutional clients and people that care about reputation, they do not want to do business, if possible, with offshore, with companies that are set up in offshore jurisdictions. This is why Switzerland is attractive, from outside and quite frankly from inside. It's well regulated, it's well recognized, AML, KYC is well enforced.
We really found that when we came to Switzerland, there was a whole different attitude. When we've spoken to other regulators, we found that we've really struggled to communicate with them. And I think some of that is down to them being short-staffed and the fact that this is a very new area. But in Switzerland, you've had so much engagement around this for the last 5 years. For example, the whole debacle with Facebook's Libra coin was all done here. There's a huge amount of learning in the system here that allowed us to engage intelligently with the regulators. And actually, when we sent them information, they would read it and ask us intelligent questions back. So that was I know that may sound like it isn't a big thing, but actually it's a huge thing. But then the other side of it is, if you're doing fintech, you go to London. 40% of all the money that's come into fintech has gone to London. It is the fintech valley, if you like. Thames Valley is fintech valley. If you were trying to build something around social media, you need to go to Silicon Valley. But this is Crypto Valley. And actually, when you think about it, we've just moved into Zug in June. We are within 200 or 300 meters of several hundred companies who would use the infrastructure that we're building.
So I think it's important to understand that the Crypto Valley is as significant as the Silicon Valley, right? So we have to think about this as the platform that the next Amazon of blockchain will be built. And of course, our hope is, and quite frankly, I am confident that some of the largest, most relevant companies will be domiciled, headquartered, and also started in the Crypto Valley, which is Switzerland and Liechtenstein.
Two simple reasons. Firstly, regulatory clarity. As we're dealing in a relatively new asset class, we need to ensure that all the regulators understand what we're dealing with and therefore have set guidelines within which we can operate. So that's the first reason. Second reason is, I guess the thing is we have access to all of Crypto Valley here in Zug. So there's a talent pool that's here, there's a knowledge pool that's here, and these two things are super important when you're trying to build out a new business.
So what are your first thoughts upon hearing this? We kept on hearing the word regulation pop up again and again.
Yeah, I mean, this is what Switzerland, I mean, the origins of Crypto Nation were a bit of a surprise. It was a bit of a punt, and then suddenly an explosion of sort of Wild West proportions, and then a response by the regulator and by the lawmakers to bring this under control, whilst at the same time adapting rules and regulations to incorporate and encourage blockchain and cryptocurrencies. I think Switzerland has done this more effectively at an early stage than anyone else. And you've seen from those video clips that it really does help a company when they want to set up, that they know where they stand, and then they're not going to get regulators knocking on their door with big fines every 2 minutes. So, I think that's something that Switzerland has done very well to do.
So the regulation and the environment here seems to be a draw card for some of those companies that we just heard. But where do you feel that Switzerland still falls short?
I think as we're a small nation, I think we have a lot of positives, as Matt just says, the regulation bit, that we were early, we have a whole ecosystem. And I think what can't be overlooked is that we have a financial center, and as well as with ETH and EPFL, a really strong technology, research, academic environment that sort of are fusing together in blockchain. And I think one of the interesting bits will be seen is that when we hopefully have mass adoption in the future of blockchain technology, is Switzerland big enough as a market? So I think what you see here is a lot of focus on more the institutional or business side of things. If you want to scale on the retail side, if was recently in Asia, obviously those markets are much, much bigger. So I think Switzerland has been really wise to pick sort of the more business corporate angle of things. And I think we're already doing that. And that's the companies we heard about. They come here because they want that. If you're more into, let's say, the more far out use cases, there's a lot of gambling or gaming, that doesn't really happen here. It happens maybe in Asia. So I think we're okay if we keep focusing on what we have.
So taking a look at the global stage, we know that Switzerland is not the only one to market itself as a blockchain hub. Over the years, crypto projects have also flocked to places such as Dubai, Singapore, Estonia. And earlier we did speak with Faisal Saidi. He's the head of the Crypto Valley Association's Middle East chapter. He's also the co-founder of Crypto Oasis, and we got his take on why he thinks Dubai is such an important blockchain hub. Take a listen.
So the ambition is always to be number one. Like their target for lifestyle, for healthcare, for education is always to be number one. And they have succeeded so far in everything they've set their ambitions to. And it's the same for blockchain. So blockchain was a wider focus, but recently, in recent months, the Dubai Metaverse strategy was announced. And what they plan to do with the Dubai Metaverse strategy is to have about 40,000 new jobs in the coming years, specifically in the Metaverse field. And their target, which is not far off, is to be in the top 10 cities in relation to a Metaverse economy. So for us, we've broken down the ecosystem into three parts. So to build an ecosystem, you need talent, capital, and infrastructure. Capital is coming from around the world. We've had huge funds come out of Abu Dhabi, like more than $1 billion, and even from around the world, they're setting up over here too. Talent is the likes of us, where you're drawing people in from around the world. Like, you've got designers, you've got founders, you've got engineers that are here. And third is the infrastructure that's provided by the government and like I said, for licensing, for living, if we just look at the roads, if you just look at that entire setup as an infrastructure, it's what helps build the ecosystem. So talent, capital, infrastructure, the provision of all of that in one place is what's building the ecosystem. Well, it's grown by 100% over the past year. And according to His Highness, they want about 4,000 companies over here in a matter of 4 to 5 years, so that it becomes the hub. So growing at this rate, I think that number is achievable.
Sandra Rowe, CEO of the Global Blockchain Business Council, is also joining us live online to weigh in on the discussion we're having here. Sandra, in your view, what are the most attractive crypto blockchain hubs around the world right now? Who is actually leading this race?
You have, thank you very much, by the way. I'm glad to be here. Greetings from Washington, D.C. at the moment. I will have to say the centers that have already been listed, Singapore, Dubai, Switzerland, are absolutely centers, as well as London, though obviously they've taken a bit of a back step in recent years. And I would also say, in spite of U.S. regulatory lack of clarity, the New York and sort of Silicon Valley and Miami nexus have also created quite a bit of frenzy and activity and capital pouring into those locations.
Sandra, why do you rank these hotspots so highly? What makes them so attractive in the first place?
Sometimes it is an accident, but actually more often than not, it is actually what is pretty prudent and practical things. For example, regulatory clarity, the infrastructure, the cool factor, the ability for a group of entrepreneurs to be able to experiment and find the talent and capital and infrastructure, as was mentioned, to be able to go and try and build companies. I think where we're going to find a very interesting crossover is which jurisdictions are able to help companies scale into those unicorn type sizes that you've mentioned previously.
Switzerland was actually among the first to market itself as a crypto nation, as a blockchain country. Do you think it still deserves this label? Does it have the environment necessary to scale up and build and produce these unicorns, as you mentioned?
Absolutely. I'll just give a very simple example of the GBBC. We are a Swiss nonprofit foundation in the canton of Geneva. We started with a handful of members. We are now the largest in the world with nearly 600 institutional members spanning 95 jurisdictions. We have a team in Switzerland, but we also have teams all over distributed around the world. And I'm often in Zurich and Geneva, as well as other cities in Switzerland. I think there's something very special about what's going on in Switzerland. And frankly, I think it will only continue. I'm very bullish on Switzerland.
So it's not just a smart marketing tag?
No, it's for real. I think there's substance and form to all that's going on in Switzerland.
Thank you very much, Sandra, for joining in. We'll continue back with our guest in the studio. So we've already heard a few guests weighing in on where the future holds, but let's turn to you. It seems that competition is heating up. Despite what's happening here, we have to be mindful that there are other jurisdictions which are still presenting itself as being a fairly attractive place to set up for a blockchain company. What does this mean for Switzerland as a hotspot going forward?
I think one thing to keep in mind is that there's this mantra in Silicon Valley: move fast and break things and be first mover. Everyone likes that. I think when it comes to financial services, when you look at the digital asset space, it's actually not true. It's the first ones through the gate get actually, decapitated or, get out of the race. You've seen that with DM and Facebook. So I think it's about getting it right. And I think it's a finely tuned balance between regulatory, technology, and commercial interests. And it's more about getting this magic sauce. And I think Switzerland is doing that and focusing on the B2B side, the business side. And other jurisdictions, the US is very good in starting companies and in venture capital, and Asia has a lot. Young population is really eager to try out gaming and gambling and other things. So every region has its forte, and I think Switzerland is really well positioned. And the second thing I'd like to repeat, and also maybe Dubai is a point in case, but more so Singapore, they're very good in building this axis between our ecosystem and others. And I think it's still very nascent, it's still very small, it will grow, and we need partners. It can't just become big inside Switzerland, we need to have meaningful partners. And I'm very positive that Switzerland has already done a lot of good steps into that direction.
Matt, what can you add here? Do you think that Switzerland needs to move faster, build faster, and get ahead?
Well, let me address the scaling up argument that's used. Switzerland's a very small market, but if you look at the Swiss financial sector, it's had no problem scaling up around the world. It's huge. You look at the pharmaceutical sector, same thing. Of course, the Swiss market is only so big, but then you just move operations abroad as well, and you can get that scale. And with something like blockchain, which is non-jurisdictional, it's out there in the ether, if you like. There should be no issues with Swiss-based blockchain companies from being these huge unicorns or the Amazons or whoever you want. It's having a firm base on which to do it, and I think Switzerland probably does, but as Alex said, not every hub is going to be the same. They're not going to be competing in exactly the same way, just like Switzerland as a financial center is a sort of a wealth management place, and New York is more investment banking. So you will probably have this kind of differentiation between different hubs worldwide.
As the blockchain hub here evolves, let's say in 5 to 10 years, how do you think that ecosystem could look like, Alexander?
I think there'll be in these three, different verticals, so to speak. I think you see different speeds. I think if you look at the digital asset side of things, there's even UK managers now coming to Switzerland, while the big Swiss banks are still very careful about the topic. They haven't been willing to really engage. They're still, if you're a client, you want to buy Bitcoin, you go to the big two banks, you're not going to be served very well. So I think there's still things to overcome on that side. I'm also very positive on the thing when you look at whatever we could sum up on the Web3, on the collectible. And if we have a big art market as well, Switzerland is leading art center. If we can combine that with blockchain, also the pharma world. So I think those type of, there'll be different speed of adoption in different verticals. And I think Switzerland has a head start, and I'm very positive as well. So the ecosystem depends on what we look for. Hopefully banking will obviously then fully embrace it, or to a larger extent. I think pharma and other corporates are already well on the way. And the interesting bit will be seen is the more creative side, the Web3 as its normal term, will that take roots? Because that needs entrepreneurs, as Matt said, risk-taking, which historically Switzerland hasn't been that good. But who knows, maybe we learn it.
And Crypto Valley, when we talk about it, it's not only going to be focused on this small town, small city of Zug anymore.
I think it has not in the last couple of years. If you look, as an example, Lugano has now adopted Bitcoin as an official tender at one of those grassroots initiatives. Actually, Geneva and Neuchâtel have quite a big companies set up in the space that are actually, I know as a fact, are collaborating with the French ecosystem. And Zurich is a natural tech hotspot. We got Google here, and Meta, and Apple, and those are already starting to look into the blockchain. So I think even within Switzerland, as we are very federal and grassroots, you'll see different types of adoption depending on what kind of skill set you find.
Matt, final thoughts from you. Do you think that the hotspot here will continue to flourish? And is it time maybe to think of a new name rather than Crypto Nation Switzerland?
I get a bit bored typing it, to be honest, in my articles and Crypto Valley as well. And now we just heard about Crypto Oasis in Dubai. They're great catchy names, aren't they? But let's face it, it's just a bit of marketing. I think I agree that what needs to happen, a couple of things need to happen anywhere in the world for blockchain to take off. First of all, you need to reduce this friction with the traditional world, particularly traditional finance, as Alex said. These two forces, almost like enemies, trying to take a slice of the same pie. I think once we see more of a merger between them, more understanding between them, then you will see more companies, more services being offered. But the other thing is adoption by the person on the street. At the moment, it's not very easy to use blockchain services, a lot of them. And I think the companies that sort of crack this problem of how to make blockchain is easy to use as the internet, for example, through a browser, will be the ones. And once this happens, then there should be a surge in global adoption in the global industry, and Switzerland is well placed to grab a slice of that.
Well, a lot of food for thought there, but as we've seen, we know a lot can also happen in the space of just a few years. Thank you very much, Alexander Brunner and Matt Allen, for joining us today here in the studio. And also a big thank you to the audience. Remember, you can share the content, follow the coverage on all the channels of swissinfo.ch, and we look forward to welcoming you at the very next episode. Goodbye.